Hey Procraftinators! Welcome to the Happy Holidays video hop. In each video we will be sharing Christmas-themed projects to get you inspired for your holiday crafting. It starts today, Saturday, November 30th, 2019, and goes through Saturday, December 7th, 2019, giving you plenty of time to watch and comment on everyone's videos. The giveaways will be announced on December 10th on each individual channel, and a list of the winners will be over at tailormadecards4you.com/blog. I will have that linked in the description box below. At the top of my description box, you will find the link to the next person in the hop, and please pay close attention as some people will be giving away a prize on their channels, and each will have their own rules for entering. For more information and a complete list of all the videos, head over to Monica's blog at tailormadecards4you.com or the Crafter's Castle blog. Links are below. Alright, now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about the card. I have an easy Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer light-up card for you today. You don't need any expensive kits to make a light-up card, and this circuit is extremely easy to make, I promise. The last light-up card I made on my channel was definitely more complicated, so today I wanted to share something a bit easier. I started by making my background first, and I ink blended Distress inks in Peacock Feathers, Salty Ocean, and Wilted Violet onto Bristol Smooth paper with my makeup brushes, in a half-circle pattern starting from the mid-left of the paper and working my way out. Then I spritzed a DIY shimmer spray on it using water and Perfect Pearls, in the color Perfect Pearl. I quickly dried that with my heat gun. After that, I took my water sprayer and splattered water all over the background, let it sit for a few seconds, and then I dabbed it up with my tea towel. I dried it off again with my heat gun, and I made sure that it was thoroughly dry, as I needed it to be completely dry for the next step. And here's a look at that gorgeous shimmer. I wanted it to look like a large glistening snowflake in the background, so I took MFT's Captivating Mandala background stamp, which I think looks like a large snowflake, and I stamped it partially hanging off the card front panel. Did you catch that silly mistake I made right there? I left that in for entertainment's sake. I can't believe I didn't catch that I didn't remove the backing paper off the new stamp before trying to pick it up with my platform door. Anyways, back to the stamping. I stamped it in Versamark ink, covered it in Reindeer holographic embossing powder, and I heat set it. I am absolutely in love with this embossing powder. I think it might be my new favorite, especially for Christmas cards. Just look at all that sparkle from the embossing powder and check out this close-up picture. Now it's time to get the prep work done for this circuit. I needed to punch a hole in Rudolph for the light to shine through his nose. This Rudolph is from Crafter's Companion's Red-Nosed Reindeer die set. I cut him off screen using some brown pearlescent cardstock that I've had in my stash for many years, and his nose is from some red vellum that I had. I'm using the Crocodile Big Bite to punch my holes, because all of my other hole punches have a hole that is too large. Plus, once I need to punch the hole in my card panel, I will need the Big Bite to do so, as it's the only one that has the reach that's that far. Once I got the hole punched in Rudolph, I placed him on my card panel where I wanted him, and then I used a pen to mark the spot where his nose will be on the card front panel, so I know where to punch my hole. I punched the hole, and then I laid my card panel on my card base, and I marked where that hole was so I know where to place my light. Don't poke a hole in your card base. On my card base, I traced a partial outline of Rudolph so I knew where to put the circuit in the switch. I wanted to make it so that you push his belly to turn on the light, and obviously I wanted the light to be where his nose was. I had previously marked where his nose would be, but I needed to trace the outline of his body, so I knew where to put the push button switch. Next, I drew out my circuit. It's kind of hard to see on camera due to me using pencil, but I will put the finished circuit drawing up to the camera so you can see better when I'm done drawing it. I started by tracing where my battery would be, which is right at his belly. Then I drew two lines that go out from the battery, one being the positive and one being the negative. You don't want either of these lines to touch. It doesn't matter if these lines stay within your traced reindeer, as all of this will be covered up. I just needed the battery part to stay within the reindeer, as that's where my switch is. At least for this particular switch that I'm using this time. Next, I took a scrap of cardstock, cut it to a strip wide enough to fit my battery and long enough to fold around my battery. This is going to become my switch. I folded it in half and then glued it where I wanted my switch to be, which is right where I traced my battery onto the card base. Next, I took a piece of copper tape and ran it from the bottom of that switch piece straight up to where I marked where my light would be. Make sure to burnish the tape down when you're done. This is the negative part of the circuit. For the positive part, you run it from the bottom side of the flap of the switch over the top of the flap onto the card base, and then keep going to the mark where your light will be. When or if you need to make a curve or bend in the copper tape, you just fold the copper tape back on itself, like you see me doing in the video. It can be a little cumbersome the first time you try it, but you will get the hang of it. If you happen to break the copper tape, don't fret. Just stick some down on top of where it broke and continue on where you left off. It's not a huge deal. Preferably you don't want to break it, but it happens sometimes. Before we move on, I want to address something. I have extremely tiny lights. So, my positive and negative leads are extremely close together where the light is. If your lights aren't as tiny as mine, and I don't recommend that you get such tiny ones, you don't have to have your leads so close together. I will show you my lights up close in a minute, but I ordered such tiny ones by mistake. I have found a way to work with them, but if you can, I suggest ordering larger ones. So my copper tape looks like it could be touching, it's so close, but it's not. You do not want the copper tape to touch. Look at these tiny lights. They aren't much bigger than a grain of sand. I was shocked when I got these things, but I am too cheap to toss them and order something else, even though they really weren't too terribly expensive. But I have a couple hundred of the darn things, so I will use them for quite a while. I struggled with them at first, with the first several cards that I made with them, and I wanted to stomp them into the ground. However, I have finally mastered them, so if you do or have made the same mistake as I have, this is how you deal with them. The listing on Amazon showed a diagram with how to tell which end is positive and which end is negative. That is what I have on that little piece of post-it note, and I keep them with the lights. On the back of the lights, it has the same symbol stamped on them. If your eyes aren't good, you may need a magnifying glass to read it though. I have terrible eyesight, but lucky for me, my problem is distance and not close up. So I can see that itty-bitty symbol on these okay. Then, you just have to refer to your little diagram that you drew on your card base to remember which lead was negative and which lead was positive, and make sure that you put the light in the right direction, touching the correct leads. I picked the light up with a little piece of clear tape. I then set the light down on the copper leads in the correct direction. I press firmly on the light, but I don't let the clear tape touch my card base yet. I place my battery in my switch, and I close the flap to complete the circuit. If everything was done properly, your light should light up. If it doesn't, then you have a problem. I usually start by making sure that I put the light and the battery in the right direction. If that wasn't it, then you make sure that your light is touching those copper leads. If they are too far apart and not touching, that is your problem. You then can add a small piece of copper tape to extend them. You don't have to redo your whole circuit if you made this mistake. Once you get your light to light up, then press your Scotch tape firmly down around your light. You want to make sure that your light is making good contact with that copper tape. After getting my circuit complete, it was time to start getting this card ready to assemble. I realized that my reindeer had cutouts for his eyes, and if I left those cut out, he would end up with one purple eye and one blue eye. So I took a scrap of black paper and I glued it to the back of him. I missed his mouth, but I will get this later. In order for the switch to work properly, it must not make contact with the battery 24/7. So, for that to happen, there must be dimension between the card base and the card front. So I pulled out my foam tape and I doubled it using the method that I've seen Christina Werner use on her channel many times. I then covered the whole card base in foam tape, avoiding the switch. Once that was done, but before removing the backing paper, I laid my card front over it to see how touchy the switch would be. I realized that the light would activate even when I pushed on the card front, like an inch to the left of where the reindeer would be. That wasn't what I wanted at all. I looked at my switch again, and I thought maybe it was because the copper tape went all the way down to the fold of my switch, and it was making contact with the right side of my battery, and making contact prematurely. So I stuck a piece of foam tape to the right of the battery to stop that. I tried my card front on top again, and it still happened. I resigned to the fact that I was going to have to put on a third layer of foam tape. I used the X-Fasten foam tape, and it was a little thinner than foam tape I've used in the past. So this might be why, I'm not sure. Anyways, I layered on a third layer of foam tape, and that fixed the problem. Then I put liquid glue on top of the foam tape, just in case I did not get my card front on the first time, and applied the card front to my card base. Next, I used a small piece of score tape to cover the back of Rudolph's red vellum nose. I trimmed off the excess score tape and adhered it to him, and then burnished it down to Rudolph with my bone folder. Vellum is one of those things that is tough to adhere without the adhesive showing, but I find that if you use a dry adhesive and cover the whole thing, it shows the least out of any other method that I have tried. I used Nuvo Deluxe adhesive to adhere Rudolph to my card. I noticed that just in the nick of time that I hadn't covered the back of his mouth with a black scrap of paper, like I did his eyes. I'm glad that I realized when I did, or he would have had a purple mouth, and that would have been, well, weird. My next task was to come up with a creative way to stamp my sentiment on my card. As usual, I hadn't thought of what I was going to do with the sentiment, and now the card was too thick to put in my stamp positioner. I was definitely afraid to stamp it by hand. I didn't really want to cover over the holographic embossing powder too much either. I kind of wanted to add to the beauty of the card. So I thought about it for a minute, and I decided to pull out my Spellbinder Snowflake stamp and die set. I found the die that best fit the sentiment that I decided to use, which was Mama Elephant's Jingle Greetings stamp set that said Merry and Bright. I die cut the snowflake, and then I put it and the negative piece in my stamp positioner to somewhat hold it in place. I stamped the sentiment in Versamark and then covered it in silver embossing powder. I ink blended the same colors I used for the background, peacock feathers, salty ocean, and wilted violet, in a circular pattern radiating out from the middle this time. I wiped the ink from the embossing, dried it with my heat tool, put the snowflake die back in the negative piece in the stamp positioner, and I stamped the matching snowflake stamp in Versamark. I covered it this time in holographic embossing powder that I used on the background. Since I couldn't get the details of the holographic embossing of that snowflake to show up in the video very well, I took a close-up of it. The camera still doesn't do it justice, but this close-up turned out pretty well. I glued the snowflake sentiment on my card with Nuvo Deluxe adhesive, and then to finish off the card I stamped an inside sentiment from Simon Says Stamp Inside Christmas Greeting stamp set. I chose the sentiment, "May you enjoy the magic of the season, the love of family, and the new year ahead of you." This is quickly becoming one of my favorite sentiments for the inside of my Christmas cards this year. I hope you enjoyed my card today, and I encourage you to check out the rest of the Christmas video hop. The next person is linked in my video description below. If you enjoy my videos, please remember to give them a thumbs up, and I always enjoy hearing from you in the comments below. As always, I hope you have a great day.